Good morning, everybody. Back at last. I'm Eli Perry, and this is another of my videos analyzing the function and the form of propaganda and the effects of propaganda in the modern world. Before we get started, I want to again apologize for another lengthy absence. This was because I spent my summer recovering from illness and surgery, which I'll be getting into in a couple of later videos that are going to deal with propaganda surrounding healthcare, which I think will be pretty interesting. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Probably to nobody's surprise, we are here to talk about the murder 1 week ago today of the right wing populist, propagandist, and polemicist Charlie Kirk. Now, there's a lot of this that I don't yet have enough information to feel comfortable commenting on in any kind of authoritative way. So there's a lot of this I'm not going to touch on. But there is one specific aspect of the propaganda ecosystem and the reactions to Kirk's murder that I am very well qualified to talk on. Today, we're going to talk about the rifle, we're going to talk about the shot, and we're going to talk about a bunch of bullshit. First off, the bullshit. Since probably 5 minutes after the shooting, along with the rather predictable calls for mass violence, deportations, arrests, executions, civil war, and lynch mobs, and no, not a single one of those is an exaggeration, there has been this idea floating around in various parts of the internet in the discussion of this murder that the shot on Charlie Kirk was so difficult as a physics problem. The distance was so great and all of this that it could not have been done by a 22-year-old college dropout from Utah. That it had to have been done by some kind of highly trained special unit, blah, 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 blah. I've heard it phrased as operators operating operationally. I'm here to tell you right now, that is bullshit. That entire idea that this was in any way a difficult shot is nonsense. Now, who am I to make that determination? Well, I'll tell you. I've been a gun person my entire life. I am 43 and a half years old, and for 40 of those years, I have had guns in my hand. Not constantly. I don't shower with them. I'm not Burt Gummer, for God's sake. But I got my first firearm. Not pellet gun, not Nerf blaster. Firearm. When I was 3.5 years old. A little Savage 22 caliber rifle. That's a 5.6 millimeter rimfire for everybody who uses the new money. And my mom taught me to shoot with that rifle. And she taught me to hunt. And later in life, in my 20s and 30s, I was a shooting instructor. I taught shotgun and rifle shooting at Camp Bud Shield, which is a Boy Scout camp in North Carolina. And for 3 years and a bit, I worked in my parents' gun shop in my 20s and early 30s, selling firearms and teaching people how to use them. In the course of my life, I have probably taught more than 500 people. I'd say 500 is a pretty good minimum. The basics of safe firearms handling, safe firearms storage, and self-defense or hunting shooting, often both. I've taught people how to correctly configure their rifle or their pistol or their shotgun for the use that they're setting it up for. And I've taught them how to use it effectively and easily. When I taught people to shoot a deer rifle, I didn't teach them a bunch of fancy math to make 800-meter shots and all this nonsense. No, I was teaching people who wanted to hunt white-tailed deer in North Carolina or Virginia or Kentucky, and to do it at ranges out to, 300, 350 yards or so, because that's the kind of shot that you get in that part of the country, unless you're shooting from mountaintop to mountaintop, at which point you need a 408 SHATAC and skills that are way beyond me. But I taught people how to use deer rifles at deer hunting ranges all the time. And I'm here to tell you, that shot was literal child's play. I could teach anyone watching this video to make that shot in about 2 hours. Less if you have experience with full power hunting rifles in your past. But I can take a complete noob, a total novice, and have them hitting a target, you know, the size of a paperback book at 200 yards in 2 hours. I've done it. It's really not hard. The physics, the math of this shooting is dead easy. Now, let's go over the gun, because the gun is the first part of this story that we need to understand to know why I say that. First off, the rifle that was recovered is something that I have sold in its hundreds. Not that exact rifle, but things like that. It's a 30-06 caliber bolt-action rifle with a 5-round internal magazine. In its original configuration, that rifle probably sold for between $100 and $250, depending on exact manufacturer, where it was made, what condition it was in, that kind of stuff. But cheap. It is sitting in an aftermarket stock, an add-on stock. I don't know the manufacturer, but I've, again, sold hundreds of units like that. They're a very popular way to take an old military rifle and make it look and handle more like a modern sporting rifle. Makes it a bit lighter, a bit handier, easier to clean, easier to modify, and they go for $75 to $120, or at least they did when I was in the business. And then the scope, the telescopic sight on the rifle, appears to be, I cannot verify this, but based on the golden line around the front bell of the scope, about an inch back from the front edge, this appears to be a 3 power to 9 power variable scope made by the company Leopold, which was very popular as a good quality, inexpensive, basic hunting rifle scope. It's a Walmart special. They literally sold in Walmart for, depending on when you were buying them, anywhere between about $90 and $150. So this is probably a $500 rifle. And it's a type of rifle that has been a cheap bread and butter meat harvesting tool for 100 years now. People were buying old military surplus rifles to hunt deer with out of the Bannerman's catalog in 1910. And after both World Wars, military surplus rifles of this type were widely sold to civilians, mostly to hunters. So we're talking about a deer hunting rifle. Now, one of the things that's interesting about that scope and about scopes like it is, from the movies, we are used to thinking of rifle scopes as being something that is adjustable in the field. We see the sniper and he's down behind his rifle and he reaches up and goes click, 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 adds a little bit of elevation to make sure he's going to hit his target. This type of scope is not set up that way. The actual adjustment dial, the part that goes click, click, click for elevation or click, click, click for windage, is covered by a pair of metal screw-on caps. They screw down and they cover the adjustment dial. Because the way this rifle is meant to be used, and this scope is meant to be used, is that you take it out to the range and you set it up once. And then you cover the adjustment knobs and you leave the scope alone. Now, some people are probably asking, why would you do that? Why don't you want the ability to adjust the scope for the range in the field? And the reason is that at deer hunting ranges, at least in the area where I was, and frankly in most places, you don't need that ability. And the reason you don't need that ability is because of a shooting trick called maximum point blank range. Those of you with a military background probably know this as your battle sight zero. What this comes down to is you have a target of a certain size. On a white-tailed deer, the vital area of the deer, the part that's got the really important stuff in it, is a circle on the deer's chest about 10 inches across. Think of a dinner plate. So what you do is you set up your rifle such that if you hold the crosshair of your scope in the center of that circle, the bullet will hit somewhere within that circle. You zero your scope at 100 yards so that the crosshair is on the bullseye of your target and the bullet strikes an inch, 2.5 centimeters above the crosshair. With the scope set up that way with a 30-06 rifle, you are good from the muzzle to 300 to 350 yards. Call it 300 to 325 meters. And that's because of the arc that the bullet flies in. This is the way that military rifles for sort of ordinary infantry grunts are set up. You know, guys running an M4 or an M16A4 with the Aimpoint M68 or with the EOTech. That's your battle sight zero. Because 300 meters, that'll get you 95% of the work that you do with an infantry rifle. Anything further away than that, A, you're going to have a very difficult time seeing it. And B, once you have seen it, hitting it gets really difficult, even for Marines. You call for mortars, you call for machine guns. If you really are having a bad day and you want to send all the fuck off and die, you call for artillery. Because 300 meters, that's about as far as you can realistically engage. Now, modern sights have stretched that range a bit, but 300 is still kind of the baseline. Yes, you do shoot further than that, especially in Afghanistan. The Marines have been stretching their capability with this with the M27. And because it's the Marines and 2/3 of their ego is bound up in their identity as riflemen. But the fact is that this kind of maximum point blank range or battle sight zero setup is incredibly common because it's easy and it's simple and it's kind of foolproof. It turns any deer or hog or enemy soldier within 300 to 350 meters into a point and click exercise. It's a point and click kill. Because you know that within that range, you're going to hit within that lethal circle every single time. Put the crosshair in the middle of the circle, pull the trigger, bang, done. This is something that any deer hunter knows how to do, if they even halfway know their trade. This is not advanced rifle craft. You could go into any rural high school in the US or Canada. Hell, you could probably do it here in the Czech Republic. You might not find half a dozen kids here in the CR, but you go into any rural high school in the US or Canada, especially in the western provinces of Canada, and you'll find half a dozen 16-year-olds who could make that shot half drunk and hanging upside down by their knees. It is stupid easy. Now, a couple of people have made mention of the angle of the shot as a complicating factor. And yes, that does complicate things a little bit. Because when shooting at an angle, whether up or down slope, it doesn't matter. The bullet is always going to hit a bit higher than your sight picture suggests that it should. And this is because of the interaction of gravity and geometry. And I'm not going to go into the math of it, but this is the way it works. Pardon me for humanizing the bullet. The bullet thinks it's flying further than it actually is. And so it hits high. So what does this tell us about the shooting of Charlie Kirk as an event? Well, when I look at that rifle, I see a deer hunter's rifle with a deer hunter's scope. When I look at the distance between the shooter and the target, I see a deer hunting sort of distance. And when I see the bullet hit Kirk in the side of the neck, I see the possible result of somebody shooting on a more extreme slope than they are used to, because he's shooting from the top of a building, not from a tree stand, and hitting a bit higher than they meant to. I see what was probably a high center mass shot that just worked out because maximum point blank range shooting is effective. People do this because it works. And it looks like it worked. Now, there are people who have been saying that this was a highly precise shot that was placed where it was because Kirk was wearing a ballistic vest of some kind. Now, it is possible that the shooter was compensating for a potential hard vest. There are vests out there that will stop 30-06, but there are not very many of them, and they're very expensive, and they're very heavy, and they're very thick. A ceramic vest that's rated to stop 30-06 is about as thick as a phone book. We're talking a couple of inches here. And this is not a lightweight piece of kit. There are thinner, lighter ceramic plates out there with roughly that level of capability. But unless Uncle Sam's signing your paychecks, you're not rocking one of those, even if you are Charlie Kirk. I'm sorry. The physics, the geometry, the equipment, all of this adds up to a hunter or someone with a hunter's level of skill making a hunter's shot and getting a hunter's hit. This is, again, literal child's play. So why am I seeing a bunch of people on the internet who should know better, people who profess to be gun people, even some people who profess to have been operators operating operationally, talking about this as if it is some sort of hyper difficult, damn near impossible, somebody call for Carlos Hathcock shot. Well, I don't know. I don't know those people's motives, but I do know that they are lying about one of two things based on their statements. Either they are lying about their qualifications and their knowledge base, because if they had the knowledge base they said they do, they would know how easy this shot is, or they're lying about the event in particular. Why? Well, let's think about that for a minute. Since about 30 seconds after the shooting, the calls for violent mass reprisal have been absolutely deafening. Now, I'm going to say this right now. I am absolutely certain that some of that noise is coming from our old pals at the Bolshoya Lubyanka in Moskva, our old buddies at the Internet Research Agency and the GRU. Idi Nahui. But I also know, because I have spent a lot of my life in right-wing spaces. I'm not a right-winger myself, but I've spent a lot of time in those spaces, especially as a gun person, that a lot of those demands for indiscriminate mass violence, they're real. These are real people saying this, and they've been saying it for a very long time. Some of the people saying this are very influential propagandists and polemicists themselves. Laura Loomer, for instance, is a literal insane person. She has been committed for mental issues at least twice. She is a deranged moron, but she has an awful lot of cultural power as a propagandist and as a polemicist. And she's calling for mass violence, mass arrests, and dictatorship on the part of Donald Trump. So I don't know why all of these people are making this claim that this has to be the result of a highly trained shooter, a specialist, and therefore implying some kind of conspiracy. I don't know why they're making that implication, because I'm not in their heads. They might be stupid, they might be vicious, they might be paid, they might be ordinary garden variety sadists who just want to watch a bunch of transgender people be tortured to death on television. They might be ordinary garden variety opportunists who see this as a way to make money or to gain political power for themselves. I don't know. But I want to close by asking you all to look into the murder of another young man at another difficult time in history. This person's name was Horst Wessel. Horstwessel. He's even got a song named after him, and it's kind of catchy. Go check it out. And as always, don't trust but verify. Just fucking verify.